Hello, it's Seb, and this year, Easter, Ramadan, and Passover all happen to overlap, I've found out recently, which is cool, and apparently only happens 3 times every 100 years. So a lot of people are probably celebrating and enjoying spring and so on. But as for me, I was brought up like with Easter and chocolates and rabbits and things like that. So I thought, why not do a list of Easter related books? First up is Watership Down, which is a book about rabbits who live in a warren. And there's this one rabbit who is like kind of Cassandra from Greek myths, in that he has these visions of this horrible apocalyptic future, but none of the other rabbits believe him, none except his big brother Hazel. And Hazel is sort of like a leader figure, and he gathers a bunch of rabbits and they all escape from the warren before the apocalyptic visions, which are all like, blood running through the hills, and it's all like gory and terrible and like pretty horrifying. Yeah, all that comes true when humans come and tear up the ground to make some, like housing project or something like that. It's like this sort of exodus story of the rabbits going to find a new homeland, and they've got their own kind of culture and their own language and their own religion. They've got a death figure, a black rabbit of Inlay who comes when rabbits die, and it's all a wonderful sort of like really realized culture, I guess, like rabbit culture. It's got the rabbits, and it's got the sort of epic story of a community moving to another one, which has got like religious overtones, and the rabbits have their own religion in it and everything, and like it just feels like a quite Eastery story to me. The next one is one that I read recently, which is called Dr. Fischer of Geneva, or The Bomb Game. There's a subtitle which is like or the bomb game, or the something with the bomb, I don't know. Anyway, the bomb bit wasn't that interesting. The bit that was the setup is interesting though. Main character works in a chocolate factory in Geneva in Switzerland, and he's a translator. And so there's like kind of lots of little passages about him having to translate into different languages to like work with other chocolate companies, and there's sort of like an underlying theme of the ridiculousness of a grown man working in a chocolate company, and like how he feels like there's something infantile about it, but why should it be, like it's a respectable job and all this stuff. So that's kind of funny, but the thing that the novel begins with this declaration of hatred for a man called Dr. Fischer, who invented a toothpaste, and created like he's like a millionaire based on this famous toothpaste formula that he invented, and the toothpaste is marketed as combating the effects of the chocolates of the company that the main character works for. So there's already this sort of interesting opposition there, where they're not entirely opposed, because the toothpaste is marketed as a way so that people feel good about buying the chocolates, and people can buy the chocolates because they know that they can then use the toothpaste. So they're sort of interrelated and symbiotic, and the main character and hates Dr. Fischer because of reasons not connected to the chocolates, but the chocolate thing keeps coming back. Anyway, yeah, it's quite interesting. And the reason that he hates him is to do with the guy's daughter, because he's in love with the guy's daughter, and the guy's daughter loves him. So it's sort of a love story at the beginning, but it's a love story within a hate story, and that was really fascinating. I think hatred is something that you rarely read about as a theme, and this was definitely a book more about hatred than about chocolates, but also about like kind of theological ideas to do with good and evil, and sort of Western culture based ideas of morality, and especially Christian ones end up becoming a big focus by the time you get to the end of the book. So yeah, both chocolate and Christianity enmeshed in one book is like, how much more Easter can you get, right? Next one is Bacchae by Euripides. This is a play about a guy who comes to a town, Thebes, and the guy claims to be the son of the king of the gods, Zeus, and the king, and he brings this like cult of people from the east who are bacchantes, and they all like celebrating and drinking wine, and everyone's having a good time. And the king of Thebes, a guy called Pentheus, is not into this. He's like, this is some little foreign cult which is disrupting the order of our great city, and we need to find this guy who's being blasphemous as well, claiming to be a son of the king of the gods, and we should kill him. This play is much older than the Bible, so it's interesting to think about how some bits of this might have found their way into the New Testament stories about Jesus and stuff. I found a lot of resonance with the Jesus story, but it's interesting because it's Dionysus, who is in many ways very, very, very different from the figure of Jesus Christ. In fact, like some people like Nietzsche even said they're diametrically opposed to each other. Dionysus, for example, isn't going to like turn the other cheek to this king. He's going to mess him up, you know what I mean? We know, like in the Christian story, we know that the person claiming to be the son of the main god is actually a god in his own right as well. But we also know that the Greek gods are really cruel and you shouldn't mess with them, and that this is going to go very badly for the king, obviously. And Dionysus is also a very queer character. He's always described as quite androgynous, and he ends up kind of making the king queer as well, in ways which I won't spoil. There's a sort of queering element which is fun. He also wants to sort of humiliate and destroy the king in a really cruel way, just like the king wants to humiliate and destroy him. Again, it's like these two people locked together in this battle of wills, but in this case, one of them we know is a god and the son of a god, so he's going to win. There's this theme of the extremity of beliefs and like kind of indulging your own beliefs too far, because Pentheus is accusing Dionysus and the Bacchants of like kind of being indulgent and excessive and like kind of pleasure seekers and going against the rule of order in his city, whereas the Bacchants are accusing Pentheus of being too extreme in his like rule of law and clamping down and like kind of going too far and challenging the gods and being a blasphemer himself, instead of having some humility and taking into account maybe it is a god who's turned up on your doorstep. So yeah, there is this sort of moralistic don't be indulgent idea, but it's undercut and undermined in different ways as well throughout the play, because Euripides is a great playwright. And yeah, indulgence is obviously what Easter is all about, just eating lots and lots of chocolate eggs. I thought about doing like Narnia or Lord of the Rings, because both of those have the Christian kind of resurrection story planted into the fantasy thing, only like in one case it's a lion and the other case it's a wizard. There's a sort of Jesus resurrection thing like planted into those classic fantasy stories, which is interesting. But actually I thought His Dark Materials fits Easter in a way more, because it's full of animals. His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman, everybody has a demon in this world, and the demon is the sort of externalization of your soul, usually the opposite gender of yourself, but in some cases it's the same gender, but like that's kind of a thing he doesn't really explore, which I think he should have explored. But anyway, there's just talking animals all around, and that's to me is like Easter and spring. And also the death of God is a sort of a theme running all the way through, the death of father figures, but specifically the death of like a god which seems to be based on the Christian god. And there's lots of Christian mythology really used in this book. God isn't the antagonist, but the idea of God dying is something which is sort of very important, especially like in the third book, The Amber Spyglass, and not just in a literal sense, but also in the ideas of renewal and rebirth, the cycle going on, and in some ways repetition as well. Like it's all like Easter vibes, it's all spring vibes, and it's all in His Dark Materials. I have two more talking animals books. First of all, Redwall, or any book in the Redwall series by Brian Jacques. It's like a medieval time period, and there's these mice and they live in an abbey called Redwall Abbey, and then there's these bad rats, and then there's a war or something, and all these sort of species of animals hanging out and talking to each other. And two of the big features of this series, and that are in the book Redwall and in every book I think in the series, are riddles and feasts. There's like pages of descriptions of food and like honeyed chestnuts and all sorts of delicious things, so there's that sort of like celebratory feast-like indulgence part of it, but more than that, there's the riddles. They always have riddles, and the riddles always lead them to objects or things that they need to find in the abbey or in the world. When I was a kid, I always did Easter egg hunts, and the Easter Bunny would leave like written clues for me and my sister to figure out the location of the eggs, and it was very exciting and fun. And yeah, that sort of like treasure hunt experience is, I think, kind of for me integral to Easter, and also integral to these books as well. Then another recent read, Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. This one is, lots of talking animals. They're all on a farm. It begins with a girl stopping her father from killing the runt in a bunch of pigs. A bunch of pigs? I'm sure there's a more specific noun for what you call a group of pigs, but a litter of pigs, a litter of baby piglets. I don't know. Anyway, she stops him from killing the pig, and then she raises the pig herself. And then we kind of enter into the pig's perspective of the world. Wilbur, he's called, and we learn about his friendship with a spider called Charlotte. And it's just lots of descriptions of animals and nature and hanging out on farms, which feels very lovely and to do with spring. But more importantly, underlying all the nature and the animals is this theme about death and about, accepting death as part of life, and death being something which naturally occurs but then leads to, new life and new connections. Death, rebirth, talking animals, it's a perfect Easter book. Then there's The Mummy by Anne Rice. This was a massive book that I read last year, and it is about this mummy, and he gets like he takes a potion so that he'll be immortal, and then he falls asleep, and then he wakes up in 1930s, I think, 1930s England, after they take him out of his tomb and stuff like that. And, you know, he's basically, it's like someone who has died and come back to life. And he's going around and he's young and beautiful and handsome, and everybody's impressed with him. And of course there's some doubting Toms who think he's just some dude, but like our main characters know that he is, you know, this resurrected, glorious looking king who's just like going around and sort of like commenting on the state of the world and being kind of outside of it in a way, because he comes from a different society in a different time, and being very noble. And yeah, it just if you think about it, it gives you Jesus vibes. Maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but he's not the zombie traditional rotting corpse kind of bandaged mummy. He's young and cool and everybody loves him, so yeah, kind of Jesus-y, right? And then finally, I want to do a short story by one of my favorite writers, Julio Cortázar. First one that came to mind was Letter to a Young Lady in Paris, which is about this guy who is staying in his friend's apartment for like a few weeks or something, and he starts vomiting up these tiny miniature like rabbits, and then doesn't know what to do with them. He thinks about killing them, but then that feels kind of bad, so he just starts basically raising them in the apartment. And of course he can't leave the apartment, and then, you know, he's just living there with all these rabbits, taking care of them, and they're cute and they're tiny and they're like gnawing at the woodwork. And I don't know, it just feels, living with a bunch of regurgitated miniature rabbits is very Eastery, right, in a sort of twisted and surreal way, I suppose. But more than that, I think A Yellow Flower is the short story by Cortázar, which has more of the Easter vibe that I'm looking for. And that is a story about a guy who meets a kid, and he's convinced that this kid, well, I think teenage boy, is his reincarnation. So he thinks that like everybody has a reincarnation in the world. When you die, you come back as somebody else, but there's been some sort of mistake, some sort of blip or like kind of inconsistency where his reincarnation has been born before he died. So he's like the only person in the universe who can actually meet the next version of himself. And then it's sort of like how he deals with that and how he goes about this relationship with this young boy. And he's not very happy about it, actually, but like, yeah, you'll see when you read. Also, like A Yellow Flower is like, he sees a yellow flower at one point, and a yellow flower is just a nice kind of spring, happy, cute little thing. It feels like fits the atmosphere for Easter, I think. But as well as being like a symbol of spring, in this particular story, it's connected to these ideas about reincarnation and death and life being kind of like tied together at the end of each other, and that kind of being uncomfortable. And I don't know, it's open to interpretation, I guess, what it actually symbolizes or what it's signaling to, but you'll have to read the story to make up your own mind about that. Anyway, I've gone on enough for now. Tell me what you'd add to this list, whether it's a book about rabbits or chocolates or reincarnation or all of these things combined, if you can, for like triple word points. Then do let me know in the comments. Otherwise, if you like chocolates and rabbits, then please like and subscribe, and have a very happy Easter or Ramadan or Passover, or just a happy spring if you're not celebrating anything in particular. And I'll catch you in the next video. Bye-bye.